Nate Carter here with today's Cornerstone Connection Daily Devotional. I'm finishing a book about the life of David with my growth group right now, and I love this phrase that Eugene Peterson uses to describe David. He says, David was a theologian. What's a theologian? A theologian is a God noticer, a God namer. We have the opportunity in our lives to be God noticers and God namers as well, as we see the fingerprints of God in our lives all around us. And two places in particular that I see God at work in my own life and God's fingerprints in my own life is actually in two of my most significant relationships, that with my wife and that with my kids. And it's probably in those two places that I learn most about God and I grow most in my faith. First of all, with my wife, I think that I see God in our relationship, and particularly in her faithfulness. And of all the things that I love about my wife, I love most of all her faithfulness to me. Over 20 years plus now, she has been by my side. Even when I didn't deserve it, she stuck by me. And in that, I see the faithfulness of God to his people, who, as we so many times have walked away from him and done things that just dismay his heart, yet he remains faithful to us. The other relationship is the relationship with my kids. And in that, I find grace. And that's really a two-way grace. I find that it teaches me grace. I have to be gracious to two little sinners that are constantly doing what I tell them not to do and are constantly trying their boundaries. And I have the opportunity to show grace to them and model Jesus to them. But in the same, on the opposite side of the coin, my kids show grace to me. Because when I lose my temper and when I yell at them, when I obviously sin against them, they so quickly show grace back to me. And in that way, they are showing Christ to me, just as I have the opportunity to show Christ to them. So I see faithfulness in my wife. I find grace in my relationship with my kids. And this verse comes to mind from Micah chapter 7, verse 18. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over transgression for the remnant of his inheritance? He does not retain his anger forever because he delights in steadfast love. So listen to that again. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over transgression? That's grace. That's the grace of God. He does not retain his anger forever because he delights in his steadfast love. That steadfast love is that same word that can be translated his covenant love or his faithful love. And so in this we see God's grace, we see God's faithfulness to us. And I've seen that in the relationship with my children and with my wife. And this brings me back full circle to the responsibility and opportunity that we have, you and I both, to be theologians, to be God seers, to be God namers in our own life. And we name God to ourselves as we see him and his fingerprints around us. And then we name God to those around us as a testimony, a living testimony to the way that we see God at work in the life around us. So, how are you seeing God's fingerprints in your life today? And how are you naming that before yourself, before your loved ones, before those around you? Look for God in the way that he is showing up in your world today, and then see him and name him to others.